So help me bring to the stage your keynote speaker for this morning, Mr. Aaron Ludin.
Good morning, everybody. So I got an interesting dilemma this morning. If you look at your agendas, I was going to speak about how to become unstoppable. If you look at the screen, though, they want me to talk about making breakthroughs. So real quickly, I'm going to get a quick vote from you guys. Make some noise if you want to talk about becoming unstoppable. How many of you want me to talk about how to make breakthroughs? Unstoppable? Breakthroughs? Both? All right, let's do it. So we're going to talk about making breakthroughs and becoming unstoppable. And I know for everyone in this room, I remember being in those chairs many years ago. I know that there's a lot of people in this room that are brand new. Raise your hand if you're brand new to Vector. This is your first conference. A lot of you there. About a third of the room. And I know some of you have been here before. Some of you have even been to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of these. And whether you're brand new, whether you've been here a couple times, whether Goose just came back, right? You've probably been to a conference and you can probably think of a time where you heard one thing that totally changed the game for you. How many of you at some point in your life, maybe in Vector or maybe somewhere else, have heard one thing or one lesson or one quote that totally changed your life forever? Raise your hand and say, oh yeah. Oh, yeah. Now, if you've been to a couple of these, though, you're probably familiar with what happens when you've heard the same thing more than once and you start to tune out. And my challenge is, how many of you would agree that you came all the way to Atlanta because you wanted to leave with at least one thing that would help you make breakthroughs or that would help you become unstoppable? Say, oh yeah. Oh, yeah. So my challenge to everyone here is to stay fully engaged for the next 40 minutes because you might just miss, if you tune out for a second, you might just miss the one thing, the one word, or the one phrase that would have changed your life forever. And I can tell you, I can trace back my entire career with Vector and everything beyond it, speaking on military bases, teaching real estate agents, all sorts of things that we've been doing, building multiple six-figure businesses. And I can trace it all back to hearing one thing in these exact same chairs. How many of you want to know what that one thing I heard was that changed my life 10 years ago? I'm going to share that at the end. All right? So we're going to talk about the keys to becoming unstoppable and making breakthroughs. Now, I realize that everyone in this room, a breakthrough might be something different for you than it is for the person next to you. How many of you would agree? A breakthrough for some of you is, how do I sell my first homemaker? Some of you are like, dude, I sold 100 homemakers by now, but I want to sell an ultimate. Some of you want to know how to have your first couple $1,000 week. Some of you want to know, how do I win on stage at SC2 next summer? Anyone here chasing an All-American, make some noise. Some of you want to know, how do I win an All-American? Some of you that have won an All-American want to know, how do I win too? Some of you that have been doing pretty well want to take it to that six-figure breakthrough this year. Those of you that have been doing six figures, some of you want to figure out, how do I take my life to 7? And so I know that when I'm speaking to some of you, I'm speaking to everyone here knowing that for us, a breakthrough is always different. And so the first thing we've got to decide is, what would a breakthrough or what would becoming unstoppable look like for me? I want you to think about that question for a second. What would becoming unstoppable look like for me? Jot it down. Take a second. Jot a couple thoughts down. What would it look like for me if I was becoming unstoppable in this business, in my personal life, in my relationships? What would it look like? I want you to take a quick second, because the number one key, the first step, if you will, to creating breakthroughs or becoming unstoppable is to make a decision. The number one key is to have absolute certainty about what would it look like to you. Look, if you get into your car and a GPS can get you anywhere, but only if what? You plug in the destination. And a lot of us, we come here, we show up, we go through the motions, but we're not 100% certain about what we actually want out of this thing. So I want everyone, before we go any further, to take a second and think about, what do you want to get out of this conference today? You came all the way here to Atlanta. There is something you want. There's something you want to accomplish. There's something you want to achieve. There's something you want to do, be, or have in your life right now. And I'm asking you what it is. And if you don't know what it is, that's the first thing that you're going to need to figure out, or you're not going to be unstoppable because you don't have a why. Does that make sense? Say yes. Yes. Let's pretend that I asked someone to run across traffic, 5 lanes of Atlanta traffic, and come back. Most of you would probably say, screw that, right? But what if a person that you absolutely loved needed you to get across traffic to save them? Raise your hand if you'd figure it out. Everyone, does everyone here know how? It doesn't matter how, because write this down. When the why is strong enough, the how will reveal itself. 8 weeks ago, I didn't know if I'd be able to walk today. Those of you that saw me come in here, I'm using a walker. I ruptured a disc in my back. I've been literally out for 10 months. Just had surgery 5 weeks ago. So when I thought about becoming unstoppable, to me, there was a point just 2 months back, becoming unstoppable was taking a shower without being in pain. Some of you becoming unstoppable is selling $100,000. But you have to define what it means for you. And for me, it was I wanted to walk today. And I was going to do whatever the heck it took to be standing on this stage today. Does that make sense? Some of you in your push, you had a goal, but you weren't committed. You didn't decide. Anyone know what the root word of decide means? It means to cut off from all other options. So number one step is to do what? Make a decision. Number two is to set lofty aspirations. Here's the problem that a lot of people make. They want to do something amazing, but they set a goal that's mediocre. Here's what I've learned about a lot of people. Bob Proctor says, most people, they don't want what they really want. They want what they think they can get. I want you to think about that for a second or write it down. People don't go for what they want. They're too scared. They go for what they actually think they can get. And worst, what they think they can get is usually influenced by who? Other people's opinions. Now, really quickly, if your family, your mom, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, people around you made so much money and lived such a fulfilled life that they're completely retired, they do whatever they want, whenever they want, all the time, raise your hand and say, oh yeah. Okay, how many of you raise your hand? Like 3? Yet what happens when we go to make a decision, when we have a new goal, when we take this job, whose opinions do we follow? Our sister, our brother, our cousin, right? Like, how many of you would take your advice from a homeless person? None of us. But all of us are like, my friend that works at McDonald's says this about selling knives. You guys get what I'm saying? Look, 11 years ago, I could have thought that selling knives was weird. But $1.5 million in sales later, my friends all wish they didn't make fun of it back in high school. 100% of them. I run into people I didn't even know in high school that say, I hear you're doing really well now. And I'm like, yeah, you should have got in on that knife thing. So right now, while you sit in those seats, you've got to decide to set a lofty enough goal to push you through the BS. Does that make sense? And it's all about the story that you're telling yourself. I remember sitting in these chairs, and I made a decision. The decision was I wanted to be the winningest All-American in the history of the company, if that's even a word. I wanted to win more scholarships than anyone had ever won before. I didn't know that I'd be number one. I didn't even care if I was number one. I just wanted to be on the top 25 or 50 more than anyone ever had. And that was the story I told myself on day one. And the reason, I'll be honest, I got recruited as a high school student. So my first All-American was my last semester as a high school student. So the math in my head was, if I win all 4 years of college, that'll be 12. And we're not supposed to recruit high school students, so who the hell is going to win 13? Make sense? That was my goal. Like, that's what motivated me. I'll be honest. That was where the whole story came from. I didn't think I was the best. I just thought I got a head start, and I'm going to keep it. Make sense? So all throughout my career with Cutco, if I had a bad day, did it matter? No, because what's the bigger story I'm telling myself? I'm on the path to becoming the winningest All-American ever. So screw the person that hung up the phone or slammed the door or didn't buy the knives. They got a lot worse deal than I did because they didn't get the knives. Make sense? So what I'm trying to say is that you've got to make a decision. And once you made that decision, you start reframing the story. You tell yourself about what you're doing here today in this business. Make sense? And most of you, see, they say that people fight to maintain an identity. So whatever level you're playing at right now in Vector is probably completely in alignment with the story that you tell yourself. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you've been like dominating in sports, right? Like you were number one in whatever you did. You're a number one student. You come into Vector. How many of you have been number one in a lot of things? You came into Vector and you're one of the top people in your office. Raise your hand. Let me try that. Raise your hands. Come on. Number ones. Why are you so timid? You're number ones. All right? A lot of you. Why do you think these people stay number one if they switch from one thing to another? Because the story they tell themselves is what? I'm a fierce competitor. I'm going to the top. Make sense? Yes or yes? So what story have you been telling yourself in the business? Some of you, your story is, I only sell this much because I'm only this old. I only sell this much because of this is who I know. I only sell this much because I'm not from this city. I only sell this much because I'm in school. I only sell this much because I don't have a car. Guess what, guys? I sold over $20,000 for this push. Guess who doesn't have a car right now? Me. So I'm telling you right now, it doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, whether you know people, whether you don't know people. One thing matters. How resourceful are you? Write that down. How resourceful are you? Because if you're not resourceful, you quit real quick. But when you're resourceful, you find a way to make it happen. See, guys, the difference between good and great and unstoppable is this little tweak in your mindset. It's the difference between saying, I've got this covered, or move out of my way, I can handle this now. Everyone follow? And so you've got to have a lofty enough goal that you can tap into that excitement. They say when you light yourself on fire, people will come to watch you burn. But if you're not lighting yourself on fire, how are you expecting to get peak performance out of yourself? How many of you would go watch an athlete that does absolutely no warm-up whatsoever? Like, how many of you would be excited to go pay money to watch someone like step on a court and walk through the motions? Nobody. Who do we go watch? We go watch the person that's there an hour and a half early. They've been training their whole dang life. They train every minute of the week. They've got their headphones on. They're getting jacked up. They're amped up. And when they get on the court, they're ready to go. But most of us, we wake up late. We roll out of bed. We don't get dressed. We look like crap. We feel like crap. We eat like crap. And then we expect to go have an amazing day. You've got to light yourself on fire. Look, if you miss everything else I talk about in this message, here is one tip that I know will help you become a lot more unstoppable than you've already been. Be up at least 2 hours before you have to leave the house every day. 2 hours. Why? Because you're going to do something first. The first thing you're going to do is litter your mind with inspiration. I don't care how you do it. Read, watch YouTube videos, listen to music, go for a run, whatever it means, you need to fill your mind with inspiration. Because one of the other keys to being unstoppable or creating breakthroughs is upgrading your circle of influence. A lot of you have really bad people giving you thoughts. Not bad people, but they have bad thoughts, is probably a better way of putting it. People that tell you you're working too hard, slow down, you're trying too much, you're going to burn out, this isn't going to work, don't get your hopes up. How many of you have someone in your life that says something like that to you? Say, oh yeah. And it's not those people don't love us, it's that those people are scared of committing to being unstoppable. Write that down. They're scared of committing to be unstoppable. And so the question you've got to answer before we can talk about anything else is, do I have what it takes? Or am I brave enough to commit to being unstoppable? Does that make sense? Am I brave enough to try it? Because a lot of us are so scared of failure, we're so scared of something going wrong that what we go for is not what we really want, it's what we think we can get. And I'm here to tell you that this conference should be all about the word evidence. Write that down. Because everything you see on this stage is evidence to something that you can get yourself. We are all human. We all have the same sample kit. So if you saw Colton have a 40K push, don't just sit there and clap and say good for him. Realize that means it's evidence that you can be there too. Does that make sense? And so the question is, do you have the bravery to go for it? Because I'll tell you, when I talked to Colton right before the push, he was amped, he was excited, he was going for it. No matter what, he was going to figure it out. And what happened? He did. So number one, you have to decide. And number two, the goal has to be sexy enough, if you will, to inspire you. Does that make sense? Number three is you have to master your emotions. You have to master your emotions. Look, until you master your emotions, you will always be a slave to them. I'll say that one more time. Until you master your emotions, you'll always be a slave to them. Or better, until you master your emotions will master you. See, most of us, we make decisions based off how we feel. I don't feel like making phone calls. Who's ever not felt like making phone calls? Say, oh yeah. Oh, yeah. All of us. The person who wins the push makes the calls anyway. See, I always get this question. When I get up on stage and I'm all excited and amped up, people are like, whoa, where do you get so motivated? Where do you get all that energy? How do you stay so motivated? And I'm going to tell you guys a little secret about motivation. Anyone want to know the secret? You don't need it. You don't need motivation. You need to learn to take action when you're not motivated. You need to learn to take action when you are motivated. You need to learn to take action regardless of whether or not you're motivated. Because what I've found is when you take action anyway, motivation tends to find you. Give you an example. Let's say you've got 5 demos for the day and you feel like crap. How many of you have ever had a day of demos that all you could think about driving there was how to find a way to get out of it? Raise your hand and say, yeah, it's me. We've all been there. Not every day, but we've all been there, right? Is that fair? How many of you, if you went to that house and sold a $4,000 order, would be excited to go on the next one and say, yeah, baby? Yeah, baby. All of us, right? By the way, guys, that was kind of weak for a $4,000 order. How loud and excited and fired up would you get if you just closed a $4,000 order? Let me hear you say, yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. So you guys got to get into the right mindset in order to make a breakthrough. Does that make sense? You've got to be able to master your emotions. You've got to decide that emotions may happen automatically, but it's your choice whether you stay in them. Emotions are a choice. Write that down. Emotions are a choice. They're what? Choice. Emotions are a choice. Look, something might have happened that makes you sad, but you chose to stay sad. Something might have happened that made you angry, but you chose to stay angry. What is one way you could have stopped being angry? Focus on something you're grateful for. It's really hard to be angry. Does that make sense? But it's really easy to let your emotions stay on autopilot. The biggest champions in the world, they've learned to master their emotions so they can master themselves. Because if you don't master your emotions, everything that happens to you is external, outside of your control. Things happen outside of your control that make you sad, and you're just sad for the whole day. Things make you angry, and you're going to be mad the whole day. Look, Tony Robbins says the quality of your life is determined by where you spent your time, meaning which emotional states you spent your minutes in. So if we could calculate your life to the exact number of minutes, how many of those minutes did you spend frustrated? How many of those minutes did you spend scared? How many of those minutes did you spend ecstatic, thrilled, and overjoyed versus angry, pissed off, and annoyed? Does that make sense? And so you don't have to stay in whatever emotion you feel, but if you choose to be a slave to your emotions, it's your fault if you don't get the results that you want in your life. Does that make sense? So you've got to figure out one thing every morning is light yourself on fire. Get yourself in an emotional state that makes it easy to say yes to the right things. I'll give you a great example. People are always trying to find a way to go work out in the morning or go do this or go do that, but they roll out of bed lazy. But if you get excited and pump yourself up, how easy is it to make the right decisions the rest of the day? Everyone following me? You can always act anyways no matter how your emotions tell you to feel. Jot that down. You can always act anyway. I could be nervous to get on the stage, or I could be excited to share something that might impact someone in this room's life. It's all in perspective. And it doesn't mean that the emotion doesn't come. It doesn't mean that when the room fills up, I don't suddenly say, well, this room's getting big. It means that I shift my perspective and say, look at all these people I might have an opportunity to serve. But it's all in whether or not you choose to master your emotions or let them be on autopilot. Everyone follow me? If you are, say yes. Yes. Number 4, you got to trade challenges for opportunities. You got to trade challenges for opportunities. What does that mean? Napoleon Hill says within every challenge is a seed of opportunity. And the question is whether or not you've trained yourself to look for opportunities within every challenge. See, most of us, we see a challenge. Like, I'll use an example. Let's say you're a level 5 person and you get a level 10 problem. I'll use a better example. Let's say you're a level 5 person, you get a level 6 problem. Is it a big problem or a small problem? Big problem, right? You're a level 5 person, you get a level 10 problem. Big problem or small problem? Big problem. What happens when you're a level 7 person, you get a level 5 problem? Is it big or small? Small. So here's what you need to take out of this. It's never about the size of your problem. It's always about the size of you. I could have easily laid in bed for the last 10 months worrying about whether I'd walk again, how I'd feel when I'm 65, whether or not this would happen my whole life, how much a bill at the hospital would cost, what would a surgery cost. You could be so focused on the wrong things, but it's never about the size of the problem. It's about the size of me. So I don't care what your limitations are. I don't care what stopped you in this push. I don't care what's been slowing you down from becoming unstoppable. I care about whether or not you're committed to being unstoppable, meaning you are not willing to quit. Because it's not about the size of the problem. It's about the fight within you to overcome the problem. And when you grow yourself bigger than your problems, they become really tiny in comparison. So with Vector, I spent 11 years growing myself bigger than my problems. So when something that would have slowed anyone else down hits me, I just pivot. So I found a way to run my business from home. I found a way to have my team sell more. I found a way to sell through emails and phone calls and other things because I wasn't ready to quit and I was going down fighting. Does that make sense? That's what becoming unstoppable is all about. Look, Michael Johnson won all these Olympic gold medals as a track star. He says, at most times, we live our life on a paper-thin edge between success and failure, greatness and mediocrity. And success is usually found in the tiniest little portions of daily commitments. The tiniest little portions. I'll tell you a quick story. My first ultimate sale that Mike alluded to, at 9:28 at night, I packed my stuff up in the office. And I remember my manager on and said, screw that, man, you got to call till 9:30. And I was like, all right. So I unpacked all my stuff. I got back on the phones, made the calls. That sounds like honest, Connor, right? So I made the calls, booked one demo. That lady bought $2,800. That was my biggest sale ever at the time. $1,400 in my pocket. But the difference between greatness and mediocrity or success and failure was what? 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Let that sink in for a second. 2 minutes. 2 phone calls. Difference between good and great. And here's the craziest part. It wasn't just that ultimate. That ultimate landed me a trip to Cancun. That trip to Cancun sold me on selling knives through college. Selling knives through college got me to like $600,000-$700,000 in sales, buying my own house, buying a car, launching a business, building a big network, speaking all over the country, and now I'm here. But I can tell you right now, without those 2 minutes, I wouldn't be on this stage. Without the 2 phone calls, I've made tens of thousands of phone calls, but those 2 made the difference between what? Success and failure, greatness and mediocrity. Number 5 is how you see yourself. How you see yourself. We talked about this before, that story that you're telling yourself. How do you see yourself? Because how you see yourself determines whether it's a big or a small problem. Does that make sense? When you see yourself as unstoppable, what the hell is going to stop you? But most of us, we have a problem. We go, how am I going to get to my goal with this problem? We stare it in the face and we go, what am I going to do? If you've already committed to becoming unstoppable, that problem doesn't matter, does it? You'll figure it out. So we don't need to spend a long time on number 5, but what I do want to share about number 5 is you've got to commit to constant and never-ending improvement. Tony Robbins calls it CANI, C-A-N-I, constant and never-ending improvement. Why? Because if you want to live an extraordinary life, how many of you would agree you have to be willing to do things that are extraordinary? Does that make sense? But most of us, we want to live an extraordinary life, but we follow ordinary people. We follow people that don't have anything that we covet or want, but we follow their advice, and then we wait 20 years to figure out that their advice wasn't right. You've got to learn to litter your mind with the thoughts of the right influence. And if they're not right around you, if you don't have millionaires and successful people and people that are fulfilled not just financially, but spiritually and in their family and everything else that ends in an L-Y, you've got to follow those people. And if they're not around you, you've got to get them into your mind. Like Jim Rohn is in my circle of influence, but he died years ago. He's never met me, doesn't know me, but I play his stuff all the time because I want his influence on my thoughts. Does that make sense? You are who you surround yourself with. You're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you spend your time with 5 broke people, you're going to be the 6th. You spend your time with 5 drug addicts, you're going to be the 6th. 5 alcoholics, you're going to be the 6th. 5 frat boys, sorry, you're going to be the 6th. Right? Send yourself with 5 successful people on the track to becoming a multimillionaire or on the track to becoming ultra successful or that are living really fulfilled lives, and guess what's going to rub off on you? That. But it all comes from how you view yourself and where you're going so that you can put yourself in the right shoes, because some of you need to realize that you are on the right path. Some of you are just going through the motions. Most of you need to make a decision today. Hal Elrod, one of my mentors, he says that the biggest cause of failure is failing to realize that today was the most important day of your life. Today was the most important day of your life, but only if you make a decision for today to be the most important day of your life. Because this conference could be something where you hear some thoughts, you write them down, you get excited, you're like, that was cool, and you go back to being the same person. Some of you sit in this chair and you're like, I refuse to go back to being the same person. I refuse to go back to this conference and have no one know who I am. I refuse to be back at this conference, not on stage. I refuse to go out and run another office and not hit my goals. I refuse to let anything stop me from getting to whatever it is you wrote down first. Does that make sense? Number 6. Number 6 is how you view your time. Or I say control your time. Because how you view your time determines whether time works for you or against you. Does that make sense? We always say that your day and your life are the exact same thing. Because if you think about it, if you want something to go great in your life and it goes great today, and then tomorrow it goes great today, and then the next day it goes great today, How many of you would agree you get to your end goal in your life? Say yeah. So your day in your life is the same thing. If you had a yearly goal, okay, and you broke it down into monthly goals, and every month you hit your monthly goal, then you would hit your yearly goal and you would hit your goal for your life. You guys agree? And if you broke down your yearly goal into monthly goals and your monthly into weekly, and every week you just hit the weekly goal, you'd hit your goal for your month, you'd hit your goal for your year. And if you broke down your weekly goal to daily goals, and today you only did the bare minimum to hit your goal for today, then you hit your goal for your month, your year, your life. Make sense? Today is the most important day of your life because your day and your life are the exact same thing. So if you want to make a breakthrough in your life, if you want to change, I remember giving this talk 3 years ago and I shared the exact same thing. And you know what I did when the talk finished? I went straight to the fitness center. Because I was thinking in my head that if I want to change my fitness, if I wanted to change how I was doing, I couldn't talk to you, get excited, be like, do whatever it is today, and say I'm going to go work out tomorrow when I get back home. You got to look yourself in the mirror and talk about your goals on a regular basis, right? Because it's really hard to look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm going to drop $10,000 for this push, but let me take a nap first. Am I right? Your day and your life are the exact same thing. And the more you can prioritize today, the more you can decide that today matters. Look, half of you are going to say, yeah, that's cool, and you're going to not let today mean anything in your life. It is what it is. But I guarantee you, at least a handful of you in this room are hearing what I'm saying and actually getting it. Like when you decide today that you're going to look back in 5 years and say, that was the moment I broke through. Like sitting in those chairs, I decided. I was in RDC. I was 18 years old, just turned 18, Rhett Development Conference in Dallas, Texas, like 9 years ago. And I sat in those chairs and I said to myself, I'm never coming back without people knowing who I am. And it hasn't happened since. So the question is whether or not you're going to make today the most important day of your life. So, time. How you view your time will determine whether it works for or against you. And a couple of things you probably want to know about time. Number one, there's not enough time. Write that down. You can't get everything done. How many of you are relieved to know that you can't get everything done? It's cool. Number two is you shouldn't get everything done. You shouldn't. You don't need to. And number three is to get done what actually matters to you most today. Does that make sense? Now, here's why I share this, because it sounds really simplistic. How many of you have ever been wrapped up with the fact that you don't have enough time? Say yeah. How many of you have been frustrated because you're running behind on all these things you have to do? The average CEO has over 500 hours of unfinished work on their desk at any given moment. So if you don't have 500 hours on your desk, get to it. Now, what I mean by that is you have to learn to be okay with the fact that, guess what? I can't get it all done, I'm not getting it all done, and I'm not even supposed to get it all done. And what that does is it gives you freedom. What's the word? Freedom to make a decision in this moment. What do I want to get done? What do I want to get done? So the question you need to be asking yourself as often as possible, if you really want to control your time, is this. As many times a day as you can, ask yourself, is this the best investment of my time right now? Because when you shift time from being something you kill or occupy or spend to something that you invest in, you suddenly realize like you have so many minutes. The difference between your life and Warren Buffett's life is he's invested his minutes differently. Does that make sense? So whether or not you want to live the life you're at or a better life, you have to invest your minutes better. Make sense? So what I'm getting at is that you've got to decide where to spend your time. You've got to decide that not everything is important. It's okay. What is most important to my goals right now? So those of you that your goal is to hit some summer goal by the end of August, I recommend you make phone calls today and tomorrow. Does that make sense? You can't look yourself in the mirror, take yourself seriously, and say, I'm stoked about this goal, but I'm not starting yet. Makes sense? So, the last thing I want to leave everybody with, how many of you have learned something so far? Say yeah? Yeah. Awesome. I know you guys, I promised you I was going to share with you the one thing that changed my life. Anyone ready to hear it? Yeah. All right. I was sitting in these chairs 11 years ago, and I remember seeing all sorts of things, people that sold $100,000 in high school, or people that sold $300,000 for the year, and I was like, wow, why can't that be me? Right? I was like, how? Look at these people, look at what they've done, that's amazing. I thought selling $10,000 was a lot, and people were selling $300,000. So I was sitting there, and a speaker said this one quote, rocked my world, I took it to heart, I never let it go. Here it is, you guys ready? Get your pens ready. Every great achievement that's ever occurred followed a moment when an individual allowed a perception of themselves to precede reality. Every great achievement that's ever occurred followed a moment when an individual allowed a perception of themselves to precede reality. Another speaker said, don't wait for reality to prove you can do something. And in the same message, he said, what we do in life echoes in eternity. And those three things I remember hearing. I was like, every great achievement followed a moment when the perception of self was able to precede reality, meaning I have to start seeing myself as someone that reality hasn't proven to me yet. I can't wait for reality to prove that I would be the #1 scholarship winner. I can't wait for reality to prove that I could be successful here. I couldn't wait for reality to prove that I was going to the top. I was going to do it in spite of reality. So, how many of you have ever been given the advice to follow your passion? Say yeah. People tell young people all the time, you got to figure out what you're passionate about, you got to follow your passion. What I've found is in a room like this, a lot of you don't know what your passion is. And so when people say, follow your passion, you're like, whoa, 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 I'm still trying to figure out what I want to major in, right? I'm going to give you some different advice, and I'm going to wrap this thing up. My advice to everyone in this world is don't follow in this room, don't follow your passion. Make your passion follow you. I don't follow my passion. My passion follows me. I make a decision about what I want to do with my life. I set a goal, I lock and load, and my passion figures out how to find me. I put emotions on the side and master them. I decide to control my time. I decide to find opportunities inside of every challenge. And because of it, my passion follows me, not the other way around. So the last thing I want to leave everyone here with is a pretty simple thought. Today is the most important day of your life. And the question I want you to ask yourself is, what am I going to do today to prove it? What am I going to do today to prove it? And all you need to do is make one decision. You guys ready to hear what it is? Say, oh yeah? Oh yeah. I want everyone in this room, before you walk out those doors, to decide that whether you're great at this job, whether you're mediocre at this job, whether you've had an awesome experience, a bad experience, or anything in between, I want you guys to decide to be unstoppable. To just be unstoppable, to set a goal, to control your emotions, to control your time, to control how you view yourself, to overcome your challenges, to let yourself be bigger than your challenges, and don't wait for reality to prove that you can do it. Thank you guys very much.